As you can see, the title is quite controversial. The Muslims are going to be upset, and I'm going to qualify. I'm not saying Muslims knowingly worship the false god Baal. If you're familiar with the Old Testament, you'll note that the main competitor for the worship and allegiance of the Israelites was the false god Baal. All throughout the Old Testament, you'll find God chastening, disciplining, rebuking, punishing, even exiling his people for their habitual habit of turning to the false god Baal. That's all throughout the Old Testament. The name Baal also pops out in the New Testament under the name Beelzebub. If you read Mark 3:22 all the way 30, the Jews accused Jesus of casting out demons by Beelzebub, the prince of demons. Beelzebub, Beelzebub, or Beelzebul. Baal, that's the word Baal. Zebul means Lord of the flies, Lord of the house. In fact, Baal is simply Satan's disguise. Because if you go with what the Jews said in Mark 3, Beelzebub is the prince of demons. But the prince of demons would be Satan. So here, if the Jews are right and Jesus didn't correct them, that means Beelzebub, Baal, is simply another name of Satan. Because there's only one ruler of demons, Satan. He rules the kingdom of darkness. All evil spirits are subject to him. If that's true, then that means if I establish tonight by the sources, Muslim sources and non-Muslim sources, if I establish Allah is simply another form, another name for Baal, and Islam is simply another form of Baal worship, then that actually further confirms Islam is the religion of the devil. It's Satan's religion that Satan inspired through Muhammad to be the competitor against Judaism and Christianity. And that would make sense, right? Because all throughout Old Testament history, the chief competitor to Yahweh, Jehovah, was Baal. Right now, as we speak, the chief competitor is Islam. You understand why it's important? So here are the three facts I want to establish. Facts that either the sources themselves come out and say, or facts that are derived from what these sources are saying. Okay, here are the three facts. And this is all in my articles. Fact number one, Hubal was the chief deity, the chief god of Mecca and of the shrine, the Kaaba. That's the first fact. Fact number two, Hubal was actually Baal. Hubal, and the Muslim sources will testify, was actually the Arabic name for Baal. That's the second fact. The third fact, the sources don't come out and say it, but that's the logical, necessary inference. Hubal was Allah, Allah was Hubal. If you actually read, quote unquote, between the lines, you're going to see Hubal was Allah, Allah was Hubal. So are you now ready to dig in? Okay, ready? Make sure you click on those links to the articles and save them. One thing I want to share. I want to give you a little background on the pagan religion in Mecca. Mecca, according to the Muslim sources, is the place where Muhammad was born. He belonged to the Quraysh tribe. And according to the Muslim sources, the Meccans were into astral worship. The Arabs before Muhammad and during the time Muhammad were into astral worship, where they worshiped the sun and moon and 5 planets because they thought there were only 5 planets. Now, in many cultures, the sun was the male deity and the moon was the female deity. Not in Arabia. The moon was the male deity and the sun was the female deity. And the sun was the consort, the wife of the moon. If I'm not confusing you, let me just read what Abdullah Yusuf Ali says. I can't read all of it. This is a Muslim whose Quran translation was widely circulated and distributed in the 20th century. It will be noticed that the sun and the moon and the 5 planets God identified, each with a living deity, god or goddess, with characteristics and qualities of its own. Did you catch what he just said? The Arabs in Mecca worship the sun and moon and 5 planets as 7 gods and goddesses. You're going to see the relevance in a minute. Now let me read the rest of it. Let me skip and let me get to the relevant part. He goes, and the Arabic word for the moon, qamar, is of the masculine gender. And on the other hand, the Arabic word for the sun, shams, is of the feminine gender. The pagan Arabs evidently looked upon the sun as a goddess and the moon as a god. So the Arabs in Mecca, they viewed the moon as the male god and the sun as the female god, the goddess. That's going to be important. The moon is the male deity, okay, because it's the planet associated with the chief god of the pantheon, the chief god worshipped by the Arab pagans and a host of gods and goddesses, and the chief god is male. So the moon, that's a masculine now, so it's associated with the male deity who's the chief. But hold on. The chief deity is supposed to be Allah. That means you just established that for the pagans, Allah was the moon god. Oh my goodness. You want me there? And the sources I'm going to quote will say Hubal was the chief god and Hubal was the moon god. And Hubal is actually the idol Baal. And I'm now going to show it to you. Let's begin. Okay, this comes from Gods, Goddesses, and Mythology. Volume 11, page 137. Hubal, chief god of the Kaaba, a martial and auricular deity, a moon god. What was Hubal? A moon god. Oh my goodness. Are you seeing it? Okay, let's read another one. A pre-Islamic deity represented by an idol in Kaaba that was destroyed by Muhammad when he conquered Mecca in 630. Patron of the Quraysh. Remember, Muhammad's tribe is the Quraysh tribe. So who was the chief god of the Quraysh? Hubal. What tribe was Muhammad born from? Quraysh. So who was the chief god of Muhammad's family, of Muhammad's tribe, of Muhammad? Hubal. Who is Hubal? Baal. Muhammad was born in Baal worship. Let me read some more. It's all in the article. This comes from Cyril Glasse, and this comes from the New Encyclopedia of Islam. Hubal, an idol, the god of the moon. Centuries before Islam, pay attention to this name. Centuries before Islam, Amr ibn Luhay, a chief of the tribe of Jurhum who dwelt in Mecca, before the coming of the Quraysh tribe, brought the idol to the city from Syria. Wow. We're going to revisit that. But let me finish it. It was set up in the Kaaba and became the principal idol of the pagan Meccans. Folks, do you understand the implication of what we just read? Hubal was an idol from Syria. The chief god in Syria among the pagans was Baal. Baal was the god that was worshipped by the Syrians before the time of Muhammad. If this Arab, Amr, brought the idol from Syria, what was he bringing to the Kaaba? The idol of Baal. So he brought the idol Baal from Syria, and that's why it's called Hubal. And notice, Hubal became the chief god of the Kaaba of Mecca. So you understand what the sources just admit? Hubal is the god of the moon. He's the moon god. Hubal was the god of the Kaaba, the god of Mecca, the chief god. Hubal was the idol from Syria. These three facts are admitted explicitly by the sources. So now let's break it down. If Hubal is from Syria and the chief god worshipped in Syria is Baal, we just established Hubal is Baal. That means Baal was the chief god of Mecca, the chief god of the Kaaba, and Baal was then seen to be the moon god, the god of the moon. You with me there? Here's another one. Khuza'a thus shared the guilt of Jurhum. They're also to blame in other respects. Now, here's what's beautiful. A chieftain of theirs, on his way back from a journey to Syria, coming back from Syria, asked the Moabites, oh my goodness, the Moabites, to give him one of their idols. They gave him Hubal, which he brought back to the sanctuary, setting it up within the Kaaba, and it became the chief idol of Mecca. Who gave him the idol? The Moabites. Who are the Moabites? The descendants of Lot. The Moabites in Syria, whom the Old Testament says, worship Baal. This is a Muslim admitting this. Oh my goodness. You catching it? Let's read some other sources. This comes from John Mulson Arnold. Notice what he says here. The name Hubal remains a mystery. The opinion that it is synonymous with the Babylonian and Syrian Baal or Bel is supported by the testimony of the Arab authorities. Oh my goodness. Are you guys getting blown away here? Folks, you're reading it for yourselves. What more evidence do you need that the pagan Arabs were Baal worshippers? Baal was their chief god, the god of the Kaaba. But the Muslims tell me the Kaaba was built for Allah. Wait, if the Kaaba is Baal's shrine and the Kaaba is Allah's shrine, and you can't have more than one god of the shrine, that means Baal is Allah, Allah is Baal. Let me repeat that again. Here is Satan's mastermind. He disassociated Allah from Hubal through Muhammad, and the connection with Hubal was lost in order to deceive people into thinking Allah is the God of Abraham and not simply the name of Baal. Because Satan worked through Muhammad as his prophet to dissociate Hubal from Allah, making it seem they're not the same in order to deceive 1.7 billion people from not realizing they're worshiping Baal under the guise of Islam. That's the satanic mastermind. Because if he still called them Hubal, hold on, Hubal was the idol of the Moabites that was imported from Jordan and Syria. And their idol was Baal. Are you saying Allah is Baal, the false god, the competitor to Jehovah? Another name of Satan? You see the mastermind? You see the brilliance of Satan in raising up Muhammad, his son, the son of Satan, who's now crushed under the feet of Jesus, and what this is going to do to Islam. The majority of Muslims don't know this, and they'll be shocked to hear this, and they'll say you're lying. They don't know this. They'll be shocked. Now here, a leading Islamic scholar, Islamicist, he's not Muslim, but he's a leading authority on Islam, Fred McGraw-Donner. Notice what he says. At the center of the town was the shrine called the Kaaba, a large cubical building with a sacred black stone affixed in one corner. That was the sanctuary to the pagan god Hubal. What are some of the pagan practices that Muhammad adopted? This is Karen Armstrong. They would kiss the black stone embedded in the wall of the Kaaba, which was probably a meteorite that had once hurled to the ground. Oh, so wait, the pagans before Muhammad used to kiss the black stone and Muhammad adopted it? Now we know why the pagans did it. Why is Muhammad doing it? Then she says in that same source, officially, the shrine was dedicated to Hubal, an Nabatean deity, and there was 360 idols arranged around the Kaaba, probably representing the days of the year. Okay, Karen Armstrong, you are not hostile to Islam. You're very friendly to Islam, and you bend over backwards to appease Muslims. And Muslims even invite you to lecture in their meetings, and they praise your books. And you admit that the shrine was officially dedicated to Hubal? Then who is Allah? If the Kaaba is the shrine of Allah, but it's the shrine of Hubal, and you can't have a shrine for more than one God. Here, connect the dots, the necessary logical inference and conclusion, Allah was the name of Hubal, Hubal was the name of Allah. How do you get around it? And even here, F.E. Peters, in his book, Hajj, he says the same thing, F.E. Peters. This Muslim historian says, Amr ibn Luhay, pay attention, where does this come from? Amr ibn Luhay brought with him to Mecca an idol called Hubal from the land of Hit in Mesopotamia. Hubal was one of the greatest idols, so he set it up at the well inside the Kaaba and ordered the people to worship it. Thus, a man coming back from a journey would visit it and circumambulate the house before going to his family and would shave his hair before it, all of which Muslims do. Circumambulate the Kaaba and shave their heads. Here, the source is saying the pagans were doing that before Muhammad. Folks, is it sinking in? Are you getting it? Now, are you ready for the shocker? You thought this blew you away. Did you know that the Muslim scholars till this day have no idea what the Arabic word samad means? That's chapter 112, verse 2 of the Quran. If you read it in Arabic, it says Allahu Samad. Allahu Samad. What does samad mean? They have no idea. Samad. Now here's where you're going to get shocked. If Hubal was actually Baal, pay attention. Hubal was actually Baal, and the Arab pagans knew that was Baal. But in time, the connection became lost and marred by Muslims, by Muhammad and his followers, because they didn't want Allah to be identified with Baal. Then it shouldn't surprise us that certain words connected with Baal worship, their meanings became marred and confused and lost as time went on, as Allah was disassociated with Baal. If Hubal was Baal, and the evidence shows he was, but then in time, Muhammad and his followers tried to disassociate Allah from Hubal so that the connection became lost, then it shouldn't surprise us that words associated with Hubal, with Baal, that were then taken over by Muslims in reference to Allah, their meanings would be lost too. But if you go back in history and see the connection of these words with Baal, then it would make sense. Guess what, folks? We found an inscription, a Ugaritic inscription with the phrase Baal Samad. Baal Samad, Lord of Samad. And Samad meant club. The Lord of the club, because Baal was depicted with a club in his hand. Here it is. This comes from Franz Rosenthal. Franz Rosenthal, a scholar of Islam. And he's talking about the Muslims being confused over the word Samad. And now he explains why they may have been confused. Let me read. There is enough room for suspicion to permit us having a look at some outside evidence. There we encounter a noteworthy phenomenon, the not infrequent religious connotation of the root Samad. In Ugaritic, that's a place in Canaan, Canaanite worship, Samad appears as a stick or club that is wielded by Baal. In the Kilamu inscription, line 15, we find Baal Samad, apparently Baal as the owner of his divine club. In the Bible, the adherence of the Israelites to Baal of Peor is expressed by the Nepal of the root Samad. So even the word Samad appears in the Hebrew Bible in reference to Baal, even in the Old Testament. The verb that is translated by the Septuagint, hetalusi, the use of the verb doubtlessly reflects North Canaanite religious terminology. From Arabic sources, we learned that an idol of Ad was allegedly called Samud, which brings us rather close to the environment of Muhammad. Now watch this. In view of this material, the suggestion may be made that as-Samad in the Quran is a survival of an ancient northwest Semitic religious term, which may no longer have been understood by Muhammad himself or by the old poets. Did you catch it? Such hesitation is what we'd expect if we are dealing with a pagan survival from the early period of revelation. Wow. Did you catch it? We now have archaeological evidence showing Samad was associated with Baal. Baal Samad, the Lord of the club, because Baal was depicted with a club. So Hubal comes from Syria, maybe Jordan, an idol of the Moabites, and the Moabites worship Baal. Hubal then comes to Mecca. He becomes the chief god of Mecca, of the Kaaba. So that means Hubal would be the Arabic form of Baal, either Ha-Baal or Hubal, he is Baal. And then Samad would have been associated with Baal. But when the Muslims purified Allah from his connection to Baal, they kept Samad but did not realize its pagan root and origin and implication. You with me there? Okay. Now, let me read Ibn Kathir. The third line of evidence. Who's ready? From Ibn Kathir, one of the greatest Muslim scholars, commentators that ever lived. This is in my article. This comes from the English translation of Al-Sirah al-Nabawiyya, the biography of Muhammad, the Prophet, by Ibn Kathir. Volume 1, pages 125, 126. Volume 1. Guys, pay attention. Ibn Ishaq stated, it is claimed that when Abdul Muttalib received such opposition from Quraysh over the digging of Zamzam, he vowed that if 10 sons were born to him, who grew up and protected him, he would sacrifice one of them for God at the Kaaba, Allah at the Kaaba. So notice his vow. If I have 10 sons, I will sacrifice one of them for God at Kaaba. Do you remember what the person said earlier? Oh yeah, but Baal demanded human sacrifice. Did you catch what Abdul Muttalib vowed? To sacrifice one of his sons. Oh yeah, but Baal demanded human sacrifice. Did you just catch it? Abdul Muttalib promised that if Allah gave him 10 sons, he would sacrifice one of his sons, a human sacrifice to Allah. Baal demanded human sacrifice. Allah demands human sacrifice. Someone's saying, oh yeah, but and then I said, what do you think jihad is if it's not human sacrifice? Okay, so now notice, Abdul Muttalib promised, if you give me 10 sons, I will kill one of them to you. Okay, now watch here. Watch here. Let's see who's going to see this. Who's going to make the connection? Eventually, he had 10 sons grown up, whom he knew would give him protection. Their names were Al-Harith, Al-Zubair, Hajl, Dirar, Al-Muqawwim, Abu Lahib, Al-Abbas, Hamza, Abu Talib, and Abdullah. He assembled them. Let's see who's going to catch this. He assembled them and told them of his vow and asked them to honor his pledge to God Almighty, Allah Azwajal, and all glorious is He. This is in Arabic, it's Allah. God in English, but Arabic, Allah. So he vowed to Allah. Okay. They obeyed and asked him what he wanted them to do. He asked each of them to take an arrow, write his name on it, and return to him. Now watch this. Remember, he's going to go to Allah and sacrifice. Allah. They did so and went with him inside the Kaaba to the site of their god Hubal, where there was the well in which offerings to the Kaaba would be placed. There, near Hubal, were 7 arrows which they would use for divining a judgment over some matter of consequence, a question of blood money, kinship, or the like. They would come to Hubal to seek a resolution, accepting whatever they were ordered to do or to refrain from. Guys, can you help me understand? He made the vow to Allah. Why is he going to the idol Hubal? And why did Ibn Kathir say this was their god Hubal? And why is he asking Hubal whether he can get out of sacrificing one of his sons? If you made the vow to Allah, why are you going to the idol Hubal? And why did Ibn Kathir say that's your God? The God of Muhammad's family, the God of his grandfather, and his father was Hubal. Okay. Now the tradition goes on to say, before it dies out. Okay, this is my article. It goes on to say that the lot fell on Abdullah, Muhammad's father. So Hubal wanted Abdullah to be killed, right? But then the Quraysh say, no, don't kill him. Make a deal with your God to see if he'll take camels in place, sacrifice camels in his place. Now watch here. Pages 126, 127. It's lengthy, but I think it's worth me reading, and we're done. So they left for Medina, where they found a diviner whose name was Sajah. So they went to a witch. To ask the witch, how can we appease Allah? How can I appease Allah so I don't kill Abdullah? Why would you go to a witch, a soothsayer, to tell you how to appease Allah? Are you catching this? I don't know if it's sinking in. What kind of God is Allah that would allow Abdul Muttalib to go to a soothsayer, a witch, a kahina, one who contacts spirits, to tell him how to appease Allah? And this is Ibn Kathir, one of the greatest Muslim scholars, saying this. Okay, so they left for Medina, where they found the diviner whose name was Sajah, as Yunus bin Bukayr reported from Ibn Ishaq, that was at Khaybar. They rode off again and went to her and sought her advice. Abdul Muttalib telling her of the whole problem regarding him and his son. She told him, leave me today until my attendant spirit comes and I can ask him. Wow. So not only do you go to a witch, a soothsayer, she says, wait, my spirit will show up. In other words, a demon, a Satan. And that demon and Satan will tell you how to ransom your son Abdullah. And Allah is going to accept it. Allah is going to accept it, folks. Allah is going to allow Abdul Muttalib to go to a witch, a soothsayer, and allow an evil spirit, a demon, a spirit, to tell her how to appease Allah, and Allah is going to be okay with it. Now, what would the true God, Jehovah, Yahweh do if an Israelite went looking for a witch and took the advice of the spirit that inspired that witch to appease Jehovah? What would God do, the true God do? Okay, now watch. Let's keep going. They left her, and Abdul Muttalib prayed to Allah. So he's praying to Allah. Next day, they went back to her, and she informed them that she had a message. How much is the blood money you prescribe? She asked, 10 camels. Okay, and then they says, okay, go back and present your man as an offering and do the same with 10 camels. Then cast arrows to decide between him and them. If the divining arrows point to him, then add to the number of camels until your God is satisfied. Keep doing this deafening of arrows until it points to the camels, not your son. Okay? And once it points to the camels, then you know that's how many camels you sacrifice to ransom your son Abdullah from being murdered. If it points to the camels, then sacrifice them in his place. That way, you will please your God and save your man. Please your God and save your man. So they went back to Mecca. When they had agreed to do so, as she had said, Abdul Muttalib said prayers to God, Allah. Then they offered up Abdullah and the 10 camels as sacrifice and cast the arrow. At that point, the men of Quraysh told Abdul Muttalib, who was standing near Hubal, praying to Allah. Hubal praying to Allah. It's all over. Your God is pleased, O Abdul Muttalib. Wait, earlier it says their God was Hubal, and it says as he's praying to Allah, he's before the statue of Hubal. Here you go. Ibn Kathir, pages 126, 127. Here. At this point, the men of Quraysh told Abdul Muttalib, who was standing near Hubal, praying to Allah. Arabic is Allah, a God. It's all over. Your God is pleased, O Abdul Muttalib. But wait, who's his God? Is it Allah or Hubal? Because earlier, Ibn Kathir told us this. Look what he told us, Ibn Kathir. They did so and went with them inside the Kaaba to the side of their God Hubal. Hold on. Abdul Muttalib prays to Allah by standing in front of the idol Hubal. Hubal is said to be his God and the God of his family. But then the Quraysh said, it's all over. Your God is pleased, O Abdul Muttalib. So I'm really confused. If his God is Hubal and he's praying to Allah, but he's shuffling arrows to the statue Hubal and he's before the statue Hubal praying to Allah, are you trying to convince me that Hubal is not Allah, Allah is not Hubal? Can you help me understand now? Why does Allah accept Abdul Muttalib going to a soothsayer witch? And why does Allah accept a demon telling that witch soothsayer how to appease Allah? And why is Abdul Muttalib going before the statue Hubal and shuffling arrows and praying to Allah at the statue of Hubal? And if Allah is his God, why did Ibn Kathir say Hubal is his God? What's going on here? What's the conclusion? What's the conclusion, folks? Who is Allah truly? He is Baal. And Baal is another name of Satan. What more proof do you guys need from the Muslim sources when you combine them together that Islam is nothing more than Baal worship repackaged by Satan through his man Muhammad in order to entice the people of God today away from the worship of Jehovah like Baal did during the Old Testament period? How many of you are overwhelmed and shocked by the evidence? And how many of you are now convinced Islam is nothing more than Baal worship repackaged by Satan? How many of you were not aware how much evidence there was to show that Allah is Baal and therefore Satan? Because Baal or Baal is a name of Satan. You guys ready?
Yes.
All right. Hubal. Now, why is the topic of Hubal important? Because in pre-Islamic Arabia, the Quraysh tribe and the Arabs in Mecca and Medina, Northern Arabia, they worship at least 360 gods and goddesses. According to these Muslim sources, there was an idol of the god Hubal or Hubal. And he was considered the Lord of the Kaaba, the Lord of Mecca, the chief god in Mecca, and the Kaaba. Now, you know why that's interesting? Let me tell you why. Anyone who studied ancient Near Eastern polytheistic pagan religions will know. This is a fact. Even though the polytheists, the pagans, would worship a host of gods and goddesses, they would erect a specific location and a specific temple for the worship of a chief god. In other words, you will not find in pagan polytheistic religions a house of worship erected for more than one god. Other gods could be honored there, yes. But the house would be consecrated to one chief god. You got to get this point down. When the pagans built a house, that house was built in honor of how many gods?
One.
According to Islamic tradition, the Kaaba was built for the worship of which god? According to Islamic tradition, the Muslims.
Allah.
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 Now, the Kaaba was built for Allah.
Allah, yes.
This was his house. It was called Bayt Allah.
Yes. Baytullah.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
They'll tell you that the pagans then added other gods and goddesses. Now, the same Muslim sources say Hubal was the chief idol, the chief god of the Kaaba, and he was the Lord of Mecca. Okay, now help me understand this. If the Kaaba is the house of Allah, and Allah is the Lord of the Kaaba and the Lord of Mecca, but then the same Muslim sources confirm Hubal was the chief god of the Kaaba, he was the Lord of Mecca and the Lord of the Kaaba. What does this tell us about Allah? Who was Allah if a house of worship can only be erected for one God? If the sources are telling us the Kaaba was the house of the chief god Hubal, but then they say it's the house of Allah, and Hubal is the Lord of Mecca, the Lord of the Kaaba, but then they say Allah is the Lord of the Kaaba, Lord of Mecca, What does this tell us about Allah? Allah was the name given to who?
Hubal.
Yeah, Hubal,
There
yes.
you go.
Yeah, yeah.
So what did Muhammad do? He erased the memory of Hubal and removed Hubal from being connected to Allah. But the Allah of the pagans at the Kaaba was Hubal. The El of the pagans at the Kaaba was Hubal. The Elohim of the pagans at the Kaaba, his
Hubal.
name was Hubal.
Yeah.
So in other words, if I read the sources carefully, this is the conclusion. Hubal was the Allah of the Kaaba. Allah's name was Hubal, Hubal. If you
Yes.
understand that,
Yeah.
I want you to see a second problem for Muslims. They keep telling us that the Arabs at Mecca are Hagarites, the descendants of Hagar, right?
Yeah.
And they keep telling us that the Arabs at Mecca are the sons of Ishmael, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
But wait, Psalm 83 states that the Ishmaelites and the Hagarites didn't worship or acknowledge the true God Jehovah anymore. So if the pagans at Mecca and Medina are Ishmaelites and Hagarites, well, according to Psalm 83, the Ishmaelites and Hagarites no longer acknowledge or worship Jehovah as the only true God. They had been so far removed from the worship of the true God that the psalmist says they need now to see that Jehovah is the true God because they no longer recognize that or are aware of it anymore. So if the Muslims want to keep claiming the pagan Arabs at Mecca and Medina are Ishmaelites, Hagarites, they're only proving that those pagan Arabs were not worshiping the true God, so their Allah could not have been the true God, Yahweh.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
So you're stuck, Muslims. Damn if you do, damn if you don't. If you want to say they're descendants of Hagar and Ishmael, then Psalm 83 shows the Ishmaelites, Hagarites had forgotten about the true God, and they were no longer worshiping the true God. So you're proving your Allah, the Allah of the Kaaba, could not be the true God, Yahweh.
Exactly. Yeah.
But if you want to now agree with history and archaeology, those Arabs in Mecca and Medina were not Ishmaelites and Hagarites, according to the traditional Islamic narrative, then that's even more proof their God is not the true God, Yahweh. Either way,
Yeah.
Islam is destroyed and buried.
That's right. Yeah.
Yep.
Wow. Wow.
Right. Yes. Wow.
Everyone got it?
Yeah.
Yes.
Sinking in.
Now, there's the article again. Now, let's read what the scholars are saying. Am I making this up, or do the Muslim sources and the scholars of Islam agree? Do they agree with what I said about Hubal? Here we go. This comes from Gods and Goddesses and Mythology. Hubal, chief god of the Kaaba, a martial and oracular deity, a moon god. Uh-oh. Did you guys catch it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hubal is not only the chief god of the Kaaba, he's the moon god.
It's
That's
very good. This
why
is good
you have
numbers.
Christians saying Allah was originally the moon god.
Wow.
Are you seeing what Muhammad did?
Yeah.
By inspiration of Satan, by influence of Satan, he tried to convince the pagans the Allah that's worshipped here is not Hubal. It's the God of the Jews and Christians. So we all worship that God. No, the Allah of the pagans is Hubal. He cannot be mixed in with the true God, because that's what the Israelites did at the time of Elijah when the Israelites wanted to worship Baal with Yahweh or as Yahweh. And Elijah said, no, either you worship Baal or Yahweh.
Or
You
Yahweh.
can't have them both.
Yeah.
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 Okay, now let's continue.
Yes.
Okay. Cyril Glasse, and this is an Encyclopedia of Islam. The new Encyclopedia of Islam, page 209. Hubal, an idol, the god of the moon. Centuries before Islam, I want you to pay attention to this statement of fact that they're getting from the Muslim sources.
Yeah.
Amr ibn Luhay, a chief of the tribe of Jarham, who dwelt in Mecca before the coming of the Quraysh tribe, brought the idol to the city from Syria. It was set up in the Kaaba and became the principal idol of the pagan Meccans. Uh-oh. But here's what I want you to remember. Where did he come from? Amr ibn Luhay, a chief of the tribe of Jarham, brought him from Syria.
Wow.
Hubal was an idol taken from what place? Where?
Syria.
Yeah.
You said Syria. Yeah.
Yep.
Syria.
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 You know why that's important?
Yeah.
Do you know who the chief god of the Syrian pagans was? Baal.
Bad.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
Prophet,
okay.
the false god Baal.
Yes.
Okay, but now think with me. If Hubal was an idol from Syria,
Yeah.
and the chief god worshipped in Syria is Baal, that means Hubal is simply the Arabic word for the Baal. That means
Okay.
Kaaba became the shrine of the false god Baal. In fact, some say Hubal either means Hubal, he is Baal, who, he, Baal, or it is the Arabicized corruption of the Hebrew Ha-Baal, the Baal.
Okay.
In other words, if you study the sources carefully, Islam is repackaged Baal worship, where Satan raised up another false prophet of Baal to deceive people into worshiping Baal as the God of the Bible. And his most successful prophet has been Muhammad thus far. Muhammad has led more people to worship Baal as God than any other false prophet in the entire history of mankind, in the entire history of Israel. I'm not making it up. We're going to read it now. Let me read some more.
Carry on. Yeah.
This comes from the Oxford Dictionary of Islam, page 117. Hubal, a pre-Islamic deity represented by an idol in Kaaba that was destroyed by Muhammad when he conquered Mecca in 630. Patron of the Quraysh, leading tribe of Mecca. You know what patron of the Quraysh means? It means that was their chief god. Now, guys, can I ask you a question?
Yes.
Last time I checked, Quraysh was Muhammad's tribe.
Yes.
And here we're told by the Oxford Dictionary that the chief god that the Quraysh worship as their supreme god was Hubal. That means Muhammad was raised in the worship of Hubal as his chief god.
Sure. That's correct. Yeah.
You got it now?
Yeah.
Okay, let's go some more. Mahmoud M. Ayub, a devoted Muslim scholar. Islam, Faith, and History, page 15. Among the many deities that the Arabs worship in and around the Kaaba were the god Hubal and the three goddesses Alat, Al-Uzza, Manat. Hubal was originally a moon god.
Yeah. Wow.
And perhaps also a rain god, as Hubal means vapor. Wait. This Muslim saying Hubal, the chief god of the Quraysh, who owned Mecca, who owned the Kaaba, and religious rites were devoted to him, was the moon god? So that Muhammad was born to a tribe that worshipped the moon god Hubal?
Yes, seems so.
You can see. Yeah.
Here's a couple more. All I'm doing is reading. This too is written by a convert to Islam named Martin Lings. He wrote an English translation on the life of Muhammad.
Yeah.
And you can actually find it online. It's Martin Lings. He's since passed away. Martin Lings, Muhammad, his life based on the earliest sources. Page 5. Notice what he says. Khuza'a thus shared the guilt of Jarhim. They were also to blame in other respects. A chieftain of theirs, on his way back from a journey to Syria, had asked the Moabites to give him one of their idols. They gave him Hubal. Wait, where did this idol come from? From the Moabites in Syria.
Yeah.
Wow.
Moabites in Syria. One of their chieftains went to Syria and asked the Moabites to give them one of their idols. They gave him Hubal, which he brought back to the sanctuary, setting it up within the Kaaba itself, and it became the chief idol of Mecca. Muslims. Your Muslim sources say the Moabites gave Amr ibn Luhay an idol of their chief god Hubal, which he brought from Syria, and Mecca became the shrine, the house of the chief god Hubal, which was the god of the Moabites. But if you read the Old Testament and read Psalm 83, the Moabites, descendants of Lot, did not worship Jehovah. They worshiped the false god Baal.
Yes.
What more proof do you want that Hubal is Baal?
You find the mysteries now. The mysteries.
But we're going to now read. This is from Hisham ibn al-Kalbi. Hisham ibn al-Kalbi, which you can read online for free. The Book of Idols, Kitab al-Asnam. I want to read the relevant parts. The Quraysh were wont to venerate her above all other idols. For this reason, Zayd ibn Amr ibn Nufail, who during the Jahiliyyah days had turned to the worship of God and renounced that of Al-Uzza and of the other idols, said, Zayd renounced the pagans and their idolatry and said this, when he used to be a pagan, this is who he used to worship. Notice what he said. I renounce both Alat and Al-Uzza. For thus would the brave and the robust do. No more do I worship Al-Uzza and her two daughters, or visit the two idols of the Banu Ghanim. Now watch here. Nor do I journey to Hubal and adore it, although it was our Lord when I was young. Zayd is from Mecca. He, along with the pagans, worshiped the chief god of Mecca and the Kaaba and the gods and goddesses. And he says, when we were young, I used to go to Hubal. Well, where did he go to Hubal to? The Kaaba.
The Kaaba.
And I used to worship Hubal because when I was young, he was my Lord, no more. Now notice what the source goes on to say. The Quraysh had also several idols in it and around the Kaaba. The greatest of these was Hubal. Okay, now, again, help me understand.
Yeah.
If the Muslim sources, because this is a book that was written by a Muslim early on, translated in English, are telling you Hubal was the chief god of the Kaaba, of Mecca. The religion was devoted to Hubal. The Quraysh worship Hubal as their god, their ilah, their Lord. Muhammad was born to the Quraysh tribe, born in Mecca, was raised in the pagan practices associated with the Kaaba. And yet these sources say the religious rites, the Kaaba, the practices were all devoted to Hubal as the chief god, as the Lord of Mecca as the Lord of the Kaaba, and he's the moon god. Convince me then that Allah wasn't the name of Hubal and that Allah wasn't the moon god. Convince me, Muslims.
So they can't. They don't have.
Convince me, Muslims.